Hi. So my name is Mr. Ney. I am working with the AmeriCorps Safe Passages program. I currently do some reading intervention groups and I'm about to start a math intervention group with Bridges Academy. And today I'm going to be reading the story Human Computer with you guys. So this is a story about Mary Jackson, the first African-American female engineer with NASA. And first, I'd like to share a picture of Mary Jackson and just read a little bit about her before we begin. So this is Mary Jackson. You can see her at work. So in June of 2020, NASA is decided to name its Washington, D.C. headquarters after Mary Jackson, the space agency's first African-American female engineer. Jackson started her NASA career in 1951 with a group of women who did calculations before the days of computers. So the machinery you see in the picture there is not, they couldn't do calculations like our computers can today, which means they needed to be really good at math. So Jackson was later promoted to engineer and retired from NASA in 1985. She passed away in 2005 at the age of 83. When NASA dedicated this building to her, the administrator of NASA had this to say about Mary Jackson. Mary W. Jackson was part of a group of very important women who helped NASA succeed in getting American astronauts into space. Mary never accepted the status quo. She helped break barriers and open opportunities for African Americans and women in the field of engineering and technology. All right. So as we can see, she's a very important person in history and in in African-American history, women's history, and also in the history of space and technology. And so as you may have noticed, I have my space background. This is an eclipse, which is what happens when the moon covers up the sun. And so you can see all of the electromagnetic rays coming out. Okay, but let's begin. So this is our book, Human Computer, Mary Jackson, Engineer. As a girl, Mary wanted to be an engineer. But because she was Black, some said, not your career. Segregation took away her path of choice until she fought back and raised her voice, demanding to be let into the classes she needed. Through persistence and hard work, she succeeded. She became NASA's first Black female engineer. Then she made sure the path for others was clear. Even as a young girl, Mary Jackson loved math and science. She loved learning how things worked, and she loved helping people. And so we can see in this picture, she's doing both. She's doing math and science and helping someone. Mary wanted to be an engineer and to solve problems with math and science. But Mary grew up in a time when Black people and white people were kept apart by something called segregation. Black children weren't always taught the same subjects as white children. There were very few Black engineers and even fewer female engineers. Mary still loved learning math and science. She wanted to know how everything worked. Mary beat the odds and went to college. She became a math teacher and shared her love of learning with her Black students. And remember, we learned that Mary's favorite things were math and science, but also helping people. So we can see why she became a teacher, wanting to help her students. Mary shared her learning with other little girls too. She was a Girl Scout leader. She loved to build wind tunnels and test model airplanes with her scouts. So here we see them playing with model airplanes, and this is a wind tunnel where the wind will blow through from that fan. And then when you put the model airplane in there, it'll fly as if it's flying while it's staying still, if that makes sense. So they can test the way the different planes fly. A few years later, after Mary had a baby, she went to work as a clerk. She answered the phone and wrote messages. She was good at her job, but she missed learning how different things worked. So Mary got a job at the Langley Memorial Aeronautical Laboratory as a human computer. Engineers at Langley were working to improve airplanes. They needed human computers who were very good at math to help them. Mary was happy to work with numbers again. And so here we see them referencing this idea of a human computer. She was so good at math that they're calling her a human computer. And remember, as we had mentioned, this was before computers, which is why they needed people really good at math like Mary. Mary loved her job, but there was a big problem. Langley was segregated. Mary grew more and more angry. She was tired of being treated indifferently. And here we see just how bad some of the conditions were, some of the obstacles she was up against. There were many people who thought segregation was wrong. An engineer named Kazimierz Zarnecki asked Mary to come work with him. Kaz thought everyone should all work together. And Mary agreed. She went to work as a computer for engineers who were studying things that traveled at supersonic speed, or faster than the speed of sound. Mary wanted to be an engineer more than ever. All she needed to do was take classes at a local school. There was one problem. The school was segregated. Black people weren't allowed to go to school there. Mary had to ask the city to give her special permission to take classes at the white school. Finally, the city said yes. Mary studied hard and became NASA's first African-American female engineer. So now we can see Mary working with NASA. And we know from the story that she had some allies, but that it was her own work and her own advocacy that brought her past the barriers that she was up against. Mary worked as an engineer for many years. She helped design the spacecraft that first carried men to the moon. Now here we see the astronaut that got to the moon, and he only got there by Mary's help because she was able to help create the spacecraft that took him there. Mary had achieved her dream. Now she wanted to help other people achieve their dreams. After all, no one had expected Mary to become the first African-American female engineer at NASA. So in this one, we can see a hint at at what Mary started to do. It says Mary Jackson, manager, Office of Equal Opportunity Programs. And we know from earlier that Mary, not only did she like to do science and math, but she liked to help people. So clearly she started to do advocacy work for other people too, to help other people get past barriers of segregation or bias against women or people of color in the field. So she was working in this Office of Equal Opportunity Programs. And she knew she wouldn't be the last. She knew she wouldn't be the last African-American female engineer. And here she is helping again, helping students work on math and science. So there's a few activities at the end. I would like to just bring our attention to these quotes here, because there's some good quotes. So here's a quote from Mary Jackson herself. She said, "We have to do something like this to get them interested in science. Sometimes they are not aware of the number of Black scientists and don't even know of the career opportunities until it is too late." So she's talking about the example that she and other African-American scientists could lead by helping open up opportunities. So this is from Gloria Champion, a coworker of Mary's. Through her quiet, behind-the-scene efforts, Mary Jackson managed to help many minorities and women reach their highest potential through promotions and movement into supervisory positions. In other words, as we've been saying, she liked to help people, and she was continually helping people behind the scenes, helping advocate for people and put in a good word and likely push up against barriers as well. Okay, we can move on to the timeline. In 1921, Mary Winston is born in Hampton, Virginia. She later marries Levi Jackson. In 1942, Mary earns a bachelor's degree in mathematics and physical science from Hampton Institute. In 1952, Mary goes to work as a computer at the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. In 1953, Mary takes a job working for engineer Kazimierz Czarnecki. In 1956, Mary petitions the city of Hampton to allow her to attend engineering classes at the segregated Hampton High School. In 1958, Langley becomes part of NASA. Mary becomes the first female Black engineer at NASA. In 1979, Mary leaves the engineering department at NASA to become an administrator and equal opportunity specialist. And in 1985, Mary retires from NASA. So thank you for joining me, learning about Mary Jackson and learning a little bit about the history of her work with NASA. Hope to see you again with another Read Aloud. Take care.